Well, I had the truck up in the air, giving it a once over the other day. If you're familiar with this truck, you know I've got a couple of axles in the back end. The thing's got 4 drive shafts in it. So I had it up in the air, running it in gear, just kind of giving it a once over, looking for bearing noises and vibrations and stuff like that. And I found a little issue. Let's see if you can see what I saw. Okay, I hope you can hear me with the truck running. Steer wheel with the truck in the air, in gear, tires spinning. Right side's not spinning because they're open differentials, so left are spinning. You see drive shafts moving. Again, I hope you can hear me. That drive shaft runs smooth. This truck there with 2 bearings, got a carrier bearing and a Jaguar carrier bearing. So that short little stuff there is running smooth. That drive shaft is running smooth. This drive shaft, I'm not sure how much you can see, it's got a little wobble to it. When I built that drive shaft, I obviously did not get it very straight. I'm not sure how much you can see, but it's got just a little bit of a wobble to it. And then the front drive shaft, taken from the transmission, it runs smooth. It runs straight through, no issues. Okay, I'm gonna get this drive shaft out of here and I'll meet you over on the bench. We are at the bench. Got the drive shaft removed from the truck. One thing that's always driven me crazy on the TV shows, even Roadkill on some of those shows, every time they need a drive shaft, I mean, they'll be a day late on their project because they're waiting on the drive shaft shop to get them a drive shaft. Now, granted, they're getting free drive shafts from the big name companies. I don't understand why some of those shows do not just build their own drive shafts. And when I say build your own drive shaft, I mean take one that's too long and shorten it. When you do see them do that on television, they'll end up cutting it in the center of the tube and just kind of halfway gobbling it back together just as a temporary solution. I don't understand why they don't do it the right way. Shortening a drive shaft to fit your application is not that difficult. The way the drive shaft shop does it, the way these are built, you have cast pieces on the end of your yokes, and then you have a tube, and then another cast piece. If you will cut that weld and separate the tube from the cast, and then shorten it to the length you need it and stick it back together, that's the way the drive shaft does it. They will cut it on a lathe, but you can do it yourself at home without a lathe if you pay attention to what you're doing. And I'm going to show you how to do that. Now, this drive shaft is a little different than what most of you guys will run into on a 2-wheel drive car. You know, normally you've got a slip yoke that slides in the back of the transmission. This particular one has a slip in the middle of the drive shaft because I've got a fixed yoke at the rear axle and at the transfer case. So a lot of 4-wheel drives will have this type of a drive shaft, but not all of them. You know, the modern stuff does have a slip. So this one's a little bit different to deal with, but the same principles apply. Now, this is a really short drive shaft, fully collapsed, you know, center to center. We're only about 13.25, 13.5. Really short drive shaft. Because this drive shaft is so short is the reason I didn't do a very good job on this one. I built all the drive shafts in this truck. There's 4 drive shafts in the truck, plus the little slip with 2 carrier bearings that's mounted to the second axle tube. I built all that stuff myself at home. Drive shafts are expensive. You're looking at $350, $400 for each drive shaft. 4 drive shafts plus that custom little stub on the carrier bearings, that's a lot of money. I took drive shafts that were too long and made what I needed. So it didn't cost me anything except for some new U-joints. And, I mean, 4 out of 5 isn't bad, right? So I messed up on one. I did these at home, laying on the bench, laying in V-blocks. I did have a dial indicator on it to try to get the run out just right. If you have a lathe, you can do it much better. But you can do it at home. This particular one is so short, you can see there's not a whole lot of tube left on this one. You know, all of this is cast components because of the slip. There's only about 2 inches of tube on this one, so that's the reason this one didn't turn out very well. This particular one, I'm going to true it. I'm going to cut it apart, and I'm going to true it up in the truck, and I'm going to show you how to do that. I'm going to separate the weld on this one where I had it welded together before. I'm going to separate the cast spindle, axle, whatever you call it, the solid component from the tube itself. Oh, it hurt. Once you think you're most of the way through, you don't want to cut all the way through the cast piece because the cast component actually slides inside of the tube. So you're just trying to cut through the tube, which is around 120 thousandths or less in some cases. It's not as thick as you think it would be. So cut as deep as you think it's going to take. And then start hammering on it, and you'll start seeing a crack down in there when you're getting close. When you get separated enough, it will crack down in your cut. Again, this is easier with a longer drive shaft. This one's so short, it's going to be a little bit of a chore. Yeah, I've destroyed this one. That's not what you want to do. Okay, in my junk pile, I found another drive shaft, one more typically like you would use in a two-wheel drive vehicle. It is the same diameter, 2 3/4 on the outside. So I think what I'm going to do, since I screwed up the tube on this one, I'm going to take a measurement from center of the U-joint to that weld, and I'll just cut off the end of this one and use it to replace what I've already screwed up here. So I'm going to be more a little aggressive on removing this, and we'll use the end of that drive shaft to fix this one. Sometimes if you try to cut in the center of the weld, you run into the same problem. If you'll back up off that weld just a little bit and cut to this end of the weld, it'll separate better. I tried to cut more or less in the middle of the weld. I'm probably too far this direction is the reason I'm having so much trouble. So if you'll cut basically to the tube side of the weld, right on the edge, it'll separate much easier than what I'm dealing with right here. Okay, I've already made a mess out of this one. You can already see where I've dented this tube all over the place, so we're going to replace that end of it. This is the first cut I made. I was too far this direction. There was still too much meat in here, too much weld in here to connect the tube to the cast piece. So I messed up. This is the second cut I made. You can see I'm right on the edge of where the weld was at, so it'll separate much easier, and I'll have to go back and clean this up. It's been a few years since I've cut a drive shaft. Sometimes you forget some of the little secrets. Now let's see if I've cut it far enough. Yeah, separating fairly easy, I think. There it is. As I said, the tube, so I can get over here where you can see it. The tube is not nearly as thick as you think it would be. You can see the cast yoke on the end, how the tube is slid up over it. So now this is where the tube had slid up over top of it, and it's separated. To be honest, I think that tube is so short, the dents I put in it probably would not make any difference, but I like to do this one time and get it right this time. So I'm going to go ahead and use the end of the other drive shaft instead of this one. I've got my measurement, so I'll cut that drive shaft off this long, and then we'll put it back together. Okay, you can use a hose clamp to go around the tube to get your straight line. I've always just made several marks with a tape measure all the way around the tube, and then put tape around it for my cut edge, and then cut right beside the tape. That's always worked for me. That's how I prefer to do it, instead of the hose clamp method, whichever way works for you. So I'm at 3 5/8. I used to be a drafter by trade, so I never used the end of a measuring tape. I always start at the 1 to get a more accurate measurement. So if I start at the 1, I'm going to go to 4 5/8. And I'm going to do that several places all the way around the tube, and then we'll cut it. As I said, these are pretty thin wall drive shafts, much thinner than you would think. Okay, I'm going to clean up the edges of both pieces, and then I'll show you how to stick it all back together. Okay, I'm going to try to do it here on the tool cart so you can see what I'm doing a little better. I've got a couple blocks of wood here because I'm going to show you one of the most important things to do with a drive shaft is make sure it is in phase. If it's in phase and the drive shaft is straight, 9 times out of 10, you do not have to balance that drive shaft and it will run just fine. No issues at all. I've already cleaned up my 2 components that we cut apart. This is the yoke portion of the old drive shaft, and this is the replacement end of the drive shaft off of the other spare. So we're going to stick these 2 together, and they do just stick together. You'll have to drive them. It's a tight fit, so you have to kind of hammer them together. But before we do that, we got to make sure the drive shaft is in phase. So I'm going to put this portion of it back together. And this spline does have there is a master spline right here. You got to find the right hole that master spline will go into, and then it'll slide together like it's supposed to. Well, I had there a second ago. Where's that? Okay, there's the master. There it is. Somewhere right in there. There it is. Okay, slides right together when you have it correct, and then screw the collar back down on it. It's kind of a seal that keeps the grease and dirt and stuff out of the splines, out of the slip. They can be a little bit of a bear. There we go. Okay, so there's the slip portion of it, and it is cleaned up like any weld. You want it nice and clean if you want a good, strong weld. So it's all cleaned. This part's cleaned and ready to weld together. By in phase, I mean this component here has to be identical on both ends. The best way to do that is to stick the drive shaft together and have it resting on the floor or some sort of spacers like I have here to make sure that those 2 components are directly in line with each other. They're in phase. It sits nice and flat on the same elevation. Nice and flat, same direction. I'm going to mark this, and then I'll drive this part into the tube, and I'll be right back. Okay, I've hammered them together in the right orientation so that they're in phase, and it's already a tight fit. So we got to reassemble the thing. Then we're just going to put it back in the truck and spin it in order to true it up, and then weld it together. It really is that simple. If I can find the master spline again, stick it back together. Screw the collar back down. That is such a press fit that you have to get your orientation correct before you pound it together. They're actually pressed together. It's such a tight fit, this component into the tube. Let's verify that it's still in phase, nice and solid, same. So we're good. We're ready to stick this back in the truck, and then we'll spin it in order to true it up and then weld it. It's right there directly under the gauge. I'm just doing a bunch of talking and the video was off. Right underneath the gauge is a high spot. So I'm going to bring that down to the bottom and tap it again. Right now I'm basically using a dial indicator as a pointer. Once it gets so fine that I can't really see the movement in the gauge, I might just messed up my gauge. There we go. When it gets so fine that I can't physically see the difference, then I'll start watching the needle and get it as true as I can. Once you get it true, you start tacking it 4 even places around it, and then you weld it up. Literally the same thing that the drive shaft shop does. They just use a lathe. We're using the truck. They do the same thing. They measure it, tap it, measure it, tap it, measure it, tap it, until they get it straight. Same thing. But this is way cheaper. And you can say I did that. Okay, at this point right now, I can't see a difference in the gap, so let's get a little closer. Let's see what we can do. I've had a problem with this gauge sticking. I cleaned it up earlier, but hear me beating on it, I probably screwed it up again. Live and learn. Let's see if it moves. It almost looks like it's within around 10 thousandths right there. Again, I'm not zeroing the gauge. I'm just kind of watching the movement. It's within 10 thousandths right there. That's pretty daggone good. That ain't bad. I've had them within 15 thousandths before and you couldn't feel it. It was fine. On the paint on the part there, it could almost be that 15 thousandths difference, honestly. Let's spin it a little bit more. I may be good right there to weld it. Make sure I don't see daylight under the needle there. Let's just zero it and see what happens. Yeah, it's under 10 thousandths difference. I'm happy with that. I'm not going to argue with 10 thousandths of an inch. Considering it was off before, enough that you could see it with the naked eye. I'm going to weld it in 4 places all the way around and then burn it in. And this job will be done. Well, that truly is the ugliest weld I've ever done on a drive shaft. It's so bad I'm not going to show you up close. But now the moment of truth. Let's put it in gear and see if it looks any straighter. Okay, I'm not sure how much you can see before, but it's much straighter than it was. So we did good. We're at it. It's a good time to paint it too. Fresh paint. Okay, that wasn't too bad. Hour and a half, 2 hours, just messing with the thing. As chaotic as that was, I hope this shows you that working on a drive shaft, building your own drive shaft the right way, is really not that complicated. If you'll just take the time to separate it the way the drive shaft is actually put together, not just cut it in the middle of the tube, but cut the tube separate from the casting and put it together the way it's supposed to be. 9 times out of 10, you don't have to balance the drive shaft. Look at it this way. If you really wanted it to be that balanced, it still had a little vibration in it that you're not happy with, even if you got the drive shaft straight and in phase, you can always take it then to a drive shaft shop and have it balanced. Think how much cheaper that would be. Think how much money I saved in this truck building all the drive shafts myself. I messed up one drive shaft, but we already talked about that, about why that was harder than it typically would be.